I did. Yeah.
What made you write that, man?
Life today, Food's Paradise was.
If you had to pick the most gifted musical families, names like the Jacksons, the DeBarges, and the Isley Brothers might jump out first. But don't overlook the Sylvers, 9 siblings from Watts, California, who sang their way into fans' hearts for years. Their magical voices perfectly blended and light up stages with an aura that made their audience happy to see them perform. However, like most entertainment groups, they had their share of struggles behind the stage that haunted them in the long run. What happened to the Sylvers, and where are these talented family members today? Let's start the ride. The beginning. Black music strives with the strength of connection. Nothing ties people together like family. Sibling acts have carved out a special place in the legacy of black music. One of them is the Sylvers. Raised under the same roof, steeped in shared stories and sounds, these brothers and sisters brought a chemistry that is hard to match. Their songs have found their way into the recent generation of musicians as Dr. Dre, Usher, and many other musicians have created music from their original samples. But how did this crew kick off as a family? Did they all sign up for some fancy music school? Let's dig in and find out.
My first instrument was a guitar, but I took the high strings off and made it just used the 4 like a bass, So I was destined to play.
The Sylvers, a famous family music group from Watts, California, became famous through tight family ties, early music influences, and a ride through the changing music world of the 1960s and 70s. It all began when Shirley Mae Weibel and Leon Frank, Sonny Sylvers, met at the Xavier University of Louisiana. They loved music and cared a lot about family, setting the stage for a big musical story. Shirley and Leon had 10 children together. Shirley was very fertile and seemed to become pregnant whenever they were intimate. Their children included Olympia Ann Olin Sylvers, Leon Frank Sylvers III, Charmaine Elaine Sylvers, James Jonathan Sylvers, Edmund Theodore Sylvers, and Joseph Richard Ricky Sylvers. 2 years later, they welcomed Angelia Marie Angie Sylvers, Patricia Lynn, Pat Sylvers, Foster Emerson Sylvers, and Christopher Joseph Sylvers. However, Christopher never became a part of the family's band. The family's music story began in the early 1960s when Shirley, who used to sing opera, saw something special in her children and started helping them develop their talents. She assembled a little group called the Little Angels with her 4 oldest children, Olympia, Leon, Charmaine, and James. The oldest boy, Leon, was the first to display exceptional musical talents. In a chat with Music and Medicine, he said he started writing songs when he was 7 and got his brothers and sisters to sing them with him.
Well, it did start when I was around 8, 7, because I would act.
He revealed that their mom, who had been a singer herself, was the first to spot what they could do. My mother heard us and told my father, who taught us the 4-part harmony, and we did. Everybody stayed on key, and that was our introduction into the industry as harmony singers because we didn't have a lead back then, he explained. They mostly sang Caribbean calypso-style soul music, mixing in different flavors that clicked with all kinds of folks. Their singing was full of tight harmonies and lively stage energy, which stuck with the Sylvers forever. Back in their hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, the Little Angels received recognition by singing at variety shows, charity events, and neighborhood get-togethers. Word spread, and soon they were popping up on big television shows hosted by people like Dinah Shore and Groucho Marx. One of their first big moments was on the quiz show, You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, which put them in front of more people and showed off their charm and skills. Those early opportunities gave the young crew real experience in the showbiz game. The family packed up and moved to Los Angeles, California, where things went well, chasing bigger chances. That move paid off big time. The Little Angels kept winning over crowds with their shows, hitting the road hard and sharing stages with huge names like Ray Charles and Johnny Mathis. They even took their act to Europe, sharpening their skills and building a bigger crowd of fans. As the younger kids got older, they wanted to be involved in the music action too. By the late 1960s, Edmund and Ricky joined, making the group bigger and their harmonies even richer. That switch flipped them from the Little Angels into the Sylvers, kicking off a fresh chapter for the family. With their age getting older, they had to let go of their image as children's singers and adopt something that would help them reach a different and bigger audience. In the early 1970s, the Sylvers landed a deal with MGM Records through its Pride label.
The president of Pride Records, which we were on at that time, a subsidy of MGM Records.
That hookup got their first album, The Sylvers, out in 1972. It had soulful songs written by Leon, and was put together by Jerry Butler, a big name from the Impressions, and Keg Johnson. The main song, Fool's Paradise, showed off their smooth group singing and climbed to number 14 on the Billboard Rhythm and Blues charts in the fall of 1972. That win put the Sylvers on the map as upcoming rhythm and blues stars. They kept going with more releases. Their second album, The Sylvers 2, came out with Wish That I Could Talk to You, which turned into their first top 10 hit in early 1973. Leon, Edmund, and Ricky took turns singing lead, showing how they all pitched in together. Other songs like Stay Away From Me and I'll Never Be Ashamed got decent play on the radio and helped them climb higher. A big turning point came when the youngest kids, Foster, Angie, and Pat, started getting involved. In early 1973, Leon wrote a peppy tune called Misdemeanor for their second album. At first, Edmund was set to sing lead, but it got handed to Foster, who wasn't even officially in the group yet. This happened because Leon learned that Edmund had grown, and his voice was not what he expected anymore. However, since it was the era that Michael Jackson and his brothers were also taking the music industry by storm, many speculate that Foster was an idea, a child musician that will compete with Michael Jackson.
Did you get the sense that they were trying to maybe have Foster become or be sort of a young Michael or competition to that?
Nevertheless, the song achieved fame, and that was the plan. Foster's voice from the radio was like that of Michael. Angie and Pat sang on it too, giving them a little taste of the action. Misdemeanor got a lot of attention on rhythm and blues stations and popped up big in the late 1980s and 90s when Dr. Dre sampled it for the DOC's It's Funky Enough. That song did so well that Foster, Angie, and Pat joined the Sylvers for real, bumping the group up to 9. Having more voices shook up their sound in a good way and locked in their whole family deal. Their lively shows and tight-knit style set them apart in the wild music scene of the 1970s. By 1975, the Sylvers switched to Capitol Records, hooking up with a label with deep pockets and influence. They hit it big with Freddie Perrin, a producer who had worked with the Jackson 5. Their song, Boogie Fever, showed they could roll with the times, mixing in disco beats that everybody loved. Its catchy groove and hook shot it to number 1 on the Rhythm and Blues and Billboard Hot 100 charts, planting the Sylvers firmly as heavy hitters in the music game. The Sylvers' formation and growth resulted from the family sticking together, relying on what they learned at home, and finding their place as the music changed around them. From Shirley spotting their gifts to Leon writing their first tunes, it was a homegrown project that turned into something huge. Despite their success, this family band was not far from tragedy. Difficult years. As the decade passed on, the music game started shifting. Disco, which they had leaned into hard, began fading out, and new styles started trending. To survive the markets and competitions, the Sylvers had to figure out how to keep their sound fresh while still sounding like themselves. They tried switching things up with their 1977 album New Horizons, which took a step away from what people knew them for. Despite the effort, it didn't sell like they had hoped, kicking off a slow slide out of the spotlight. The Sylvers were desperate to make a change in their music. Some were getting older and didn't like singing about high school dances. They set their sights on songs that would grab a crowd with more grown-up tastes. To pull that off, they had to make a big call. They decided to part ways with Freddie Perrin, who had helped in some of their biggest hits. However, Leon, who used to write their songs, was in charge of everything. It is no surprise. Leon had been the leader right from their bedroom, and he was the one who trained Edmund, so he was expected to take leadership and help the group achieve their desired level. He started writing and producing songs that aligned with their new direction. However, the pressure and setbacks were difficult because the family faced a financial crisis. Their parents divorced, so Leon led both the family and the music. They tried to switch their music style, but they spent money to engage new choreographers in the group and changed many things in their shows to match their music style. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing like they had pictured. Leon's writing and production skills were not sufficient to attract the audience they wanted, and people did not participate like they used to dance and pay to watch their old jams. The big hits weren't rolling in like they used to, and the setbacks started piling up. Some of the siblings got jittery. They weren't sure if they were on the right track or if Leon could help them get back to the top. That's when a new manager named Al Ross showed up. He boasted he could get them back in the game, promising to make them one of the hottest music groups around again. But there was a big condition that they had to accept. They had to buy into his plan, which didn't have Leon running the show. When Leon heard about his agenda, he was unhappy because he had been in control since childhood and knew the business better. Leon took a strong stand against the idea and told Al Ross to get lost. But not everybody in the family was on the same page. They had been desperate to regain stamina for a while and were hungry for anything that might work. Things started getting tense between them. The arguing got so bad that they were left with two options. The Sylvers had to stick with Leon leading the charge, or go with Al Ross's ideas. In the end, they went with Al Ross. However, it wasn't just about the music. Some of the group thought Leon had gotten too bossy. He liked things his way and didn't always hear them out. They felt he treated the group like his own thing instead of something they all built together. That frustration had a hand in why they ended up picking Al Ross. It was a huge moment for the Sylvers, but it didn't take them where they'd hoped it would. One serious mistake they made was how their money was handled. Even with all the hits, the Sylvers were scraping by financially. Whoever was watching the cash didn't do them any favors, and the deals they signed didn't leave them much to show for their work. That kind of mess stirred up bad blood inside the group, leaving some of them fed up and dragging down the desire they needed to keep going strong. Like the case of Al Ross, they agreed to give him 50% of all their earnings, which was too much. On top of that, having 9 brothers and sisters in the mix made things tricky. Running a crew that big meant sorting out who got what and keeping everyone happy, which wasn't simple. All those moving parts probably sparked fights and pulled them apart as time passed. By the late 1970s, some started looking out for themselves instead of the group. Leon Sylvers, the third, the main guy writing their songs, turned his eyes to producing for other people. He started working with groupists like Shalimar and teamed up with producer Dick Griffey, cooking up hits outside the family circle. Leon's external involvement took off, but his stepping back left a hole in the Sylvers that they couldn't patch up easily. It's not rare for band members to separate from a group and try going solo. However, it often breaks the people and creativity involved. For the Sylvers, losing Leon hit hard since he had been the glue for their sound and wins. They struggled to keep their spark and stick together without him full time. Come the early 1980s, the Sylvers couldn't find their way back to the top. Albums like Concept in 1981 didn't make waves on the charts. The music world was changing fast, with new wave, hip-hop, and other sounds taking over, pushing them further out of the game. They just couldn't find a way to fit into what was trending, and that kept them slipping. As people worldwide started losing their taste for dance tunes in the early 1980s, the Sylvers' star began to dim too. In 1981, 5 of the group's members produced a fresh album called Concept for Solar Records, with Leon handling production and laying down bass but not singing. The first song off that record, Come Back Lover Come Back, with a grown-up Foster taking lead, made a little trend, landing at number 63 on the Billboard charts. Another track, Take It to the Top, didn't even chart, but both songs showed up later on a Solar Records throwback box set. After sitting quiet for 3 years, the siblings, now 6 of them, with Charmaine back in the crew, got back together in 1984 with new people running the show, Weisner Damon, and a new label, Geffen Records. They released an album called Bizarre, but it didn't take off. The record didn't get much push, though it had only 2 small hits. In One Love and Out the Other hit number 42, and Falling for Your Love reached number 76. Right after the Geffen album flopped in sales, the brothers and sisters called it quits for good in 1985. They didn't stop practicing with music though. They were busy in studios, playing and singing backup for people like Janet Jackson. Edmund gave a solo album a shot for Arista in 1985, but it never hit shelves in the United States. One song from it, I Love the Streets, came out in Japan in 1989. Foster started his group, High Tech, in 1989, but 2 CDs went off without much notice, and a solo MP3 CD in 1998 called Foster Versus. Foster didn't catch on either. All these pieces, money troubles, family issues, shaky management, and a changed music scene were contributing factors and kept them slow until they couldn't keep it together. By 1985, they had thrown in the towel. The Sylvers, as a full squad, were done for good. Looking back, it's plain that outside pressures and misunderstandings that grew inside the group took them off course. The Sylvers' show spell of massive success reveals how tricky it can be for bands, especially ones made up of family, to keep the good times going. Their stories' sky highs and some serious lows showed how talent, management, and the music business come together. There's not much written down about who was running things when the Sylvers started fading, but it's obvious that how the bosses handled the cash, picked their moves, and kept up with the times mattered a lot. Their tale proves how those things can make or break a music crew's run. Wrapping it up, the Sylvers climb and crash, tell a big story about what musical groups are up against in a world that never stops changing. They started out killing it, but some slip-ups and outside headaches showed how tough it is to stay on top. What happened to them still echoes, handing out lessons for new artists, trying to dodge the same bumps down the road. Where are these crew members, and what are they doing today? Let's delve into their current lives. Their lives today. After all the hurdles they faced trying to make it on their own, the Sylvers went through many personal and work-related messes that shook up their lives. When the group split up in the middle of the 1980s, a few of them ran into rough patches like problems with substances and the law. Leon Sylvers was always known for having a big personality, but people also noticed he had the habit of chasing charming women. He had many girlfriends, though he wasn't as out there as his brother Edmund. Even after walking away from the Sylvers, Leon stayed deep in the music game. He started teaming up with Don Cornelius, a famous television producer, and Dick Griffey, a music big name. Cornelius wanted Leon to pitch in with a new group called Shalimar. He jumped into that job and ended up doing even better. Many say he was the most successful Sylvers after leaving the family band. He earned a solid name as a producer, working with various singers and leaving a big mark on the music world. This is not a coincidence because he was the leader who wrote and produced music for his family. Charmaine Sylvers took a different road. Unlike some of her brothers and sisters, she stayed out of the public eye and put her energy into her life. There were never controversies, stories, or gossip about her, and she seemed to like keeping things private. Charmaine focused on her job and family, living a calm life without grabbing attention. Some people just like things quiet, and she was one of them. James Sylvers was the same way. No drama ever stained him. If anything bad happened, it never hit the papers. From what people can tell, he has kept things steady, looking after his family and holding down a regular job. Not everyone wants the spotlight, and James looks happy and stays clear. However, Edmund Sylvers had a whole different story. As one of the main voices in the Sylvers, he figured he could make it big on his own, like Michael Jackson did. His singing carried many of their biggest songs, so he thought fame was in the bag. He tried going solo, but it didn't work out like he had dreamed. His career never took off the way he wanted. He became increasingly upset about it. That frustration spilled into his personal life, and people started talking about how he mistreated women. Some said he had between 11 and 15 kids with different ladies. That is the height of indiscipline for a promising star. Even without the success in music that he dreamed of, he would have still lived a disciplined life. Somewhere along the line, Edmund had a huge fight with his family. He packed up, left California, and moved to Virginia, cutting off his relatives. People tell different stories about why he split. Some say it was about money. Others think he felt he was above the rest of them. Whatever it was, he started over, far away. Between 1989 and 2004, Edmund moved around a lot. He never settled anywhere for a long time. Some believe it was because he couldn't keep up with bills. There were times he couldn't even pay rent. He ended up in cheap housing, leaning on government help. By 2004, his hopes of being a star were long gone. He had quit music and was working a plain factory job just to get by. That same year, doctors found lung cancer, and he passed away at 47. When he died, there wasn't much left for his family. No cash, and it looked like he had lost touch with everyone. Even now, his grave doesn't have a headstone, so his loved ones can at least keep flowers. But the reality is, he was never available for his family. He chose running over responsibilities. Ricky Sylvers, who used to be all about staying healthy, hit hard times after the group's glory days faded. As a kid, he had spent his whole life on stage, and when the crowds went away, he didn't know what to do with himself. That letdown was tough, and he ended up turning to substances. Like it often goes, substances dragged him down a bad road. People say substance problems usually end up in one of three spots: dead, broke, or locked up. For Ricky, it was jail. But lately it seems like he has pulled himself together. Angie Sylvers had her fight. She battled with drinking for years, starting heavy as a teenager and keeping it up as she got older. The good news is that she finally got help. She's been off the bottle for a good while now. Pat Sylvers didn't have any big scandals to point to. There's not much out there about her personal life, but one thing's for sure. She was exceptionally gorgeous. All the Sylvers sisters were pretty, but many people say Pat stood out. Over the years, she kept things to herself, steering clear of trouble or bad press. Foster Sylvers, though, had a brutal way to go. Like Edmund, he thought he could strike out as a solo star. Foster gave it a shot when the Sylvers stopped being a big band, but it didn't catch fire like he planned. He struggled, and in time, he turned to substances for solace too. That wrecked his life. There was a period when he had no home and nothing to eat, but it got even worse. In 2007, Foster got hit with charges for sexually assaulting a kid. Reports say he went into a room where a child was sleeping and did something awful. The details point to him either doing something wrong to the kid or making the kid do it to him. Either way, it was terrible. He got arrested and sent to prison for it. Some speculations assume the child might have been family, but nobody has ever proved that.
New on the night beat, a man is accused of allowing his cousin to rape a young girl. The state trusted it.
While locked up, Foster had a hard time. Everybody knows prisoners don't take kindly to people who hurt kids. When the other inmates found out what he did, they made him pay. He got beat up over and over, landing in the prison infirmary more than once. Eventually, Foster got out, but his name was trashed for good. The Sylvers used to be one of the most talented music families around, but when their big days ended, lots of them hit tough times. Some kept their heads down and lived quietly, away from trouble, while others wrestled with substances, money woes, or run-ins with the law. Their stories full of ups and downs. For some, the downs were way bigger. During the summer of 2011, the Sylvers got spotlighted on the Television One show, Unsung, which was a big hit. Leon, James, Charmaine, Angie, and Pat showed up, along with their mom Shirley, to talk about how their music career went, the good times, and what came after. Their mother passed away in 2024 at 82. They mentioned that Foster and Ricky were locked up when the show was filmed because they had broken parole rules. Later on, after Foster got out, he teamed up with his sisters Angie and Pat for a television spot on the Cindy Davis show.
In the 70s, with candy-coated hits like Boogie Fever, Hotline, and High School.
There, they talked about how the music business works, the ins and outs of it, and some other experiences. Legacy of the Sylvers. The Sylvers left a musical legacy that outlived their time in the limelight. They were a family band that mixed smooth singing, lively shows, and catchy tunes to make a sound that shaped many artists who came later. Their songs pulled together bits of soul, funk, and disco, giving them a special style that popped during the 1970s and continued. Even when their popularity dropped, their mark on the music world stayed solid. Many artists and producers who came after them saw their influence and said the Sylvers helped light the way for their paths in music. One of the biggest things the Sylvers did was help mold the sound of rhythm and blues and funk. Their songs felt polished but still had heart, and the way they sang together was tricky but sounded easy. Many artists who grew up hearing their stuff tried to copy that mix of voices and steady beats. The way they put their songs out there with tight layers of singing and smooth switches turned into a guide for other groups. You can hear echoes of the Sylvers in the music of bands that ruled the rhythm and blues charts in the 1980s and 1990s. New Edition, one of the top boy bands in the 1980s, picked up some of what the Sylvers were doing and ran with it. The way they sang together and moved in step on stage showed off stuff the Sylvers had done years before. The Jacksons, who were around at the same time, worked a similar game plan, but many people thought the Sylvers were just as good with their voices and how they owned the stage. Sure, the Jacksons got more attention overall, but people studying music history often say the Sylvers should have gotten more credit for what they brought back then. One of the clearest ways the Sylvers made waves was through Leon Sylvers. After he had stopped singing with the group, he became a producer and helped define how the 1980s sounded. He worked with many big-name artists and bands, making music that carried that same smooth but funky feel the Sylvers had nailed down earlier. He had a major hand in shaping the sound for groups like Shalimar, The Whispers, and Lakeside. His talent for building songs with full harmonies and strong rhythms made him one of the go-to producers of his day. The Sylvers' music and energetic dance moves made them what everyone admired and listened to at their peak. It was not easy to achieve fame along with the Five Jacksons, but they did it, showing how good they were. Despite the fallout in the later years, the Sylvers made a name for themselves in the legacy of black music. Which of their songs do you love the most? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.